Hi, good evening all. This is Vishal Singhal from Shellstrat, your host for today. So today we have a special guest from United States, and he is Don White, founder of AgilityScience. He consults in agility science to various companies. He initiated his agile transformation journey at a small healthcare marketing company and a startup virtual reality education company. Coached 16 teams, including an entire business pillar at the Fortune 1 company in last few years. And he started his journey in 2012, where he was software quality assurance manager for at GoDaddy. It's a website hosting company, I believe, and quite popular across the world. And overall, he has about 12 years in software quality assurance experience spanning banking, insurance, domain registration, and retail software. So I'll hand over the controls to Don, and he will take us from there. I've seen his presentation before, and it's pretty interesting. So I am sure all of you will like it tremendously. So transferring the controls to Don, please go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Vishal. I'm really excited about having the opportunity to present organizational learning, unlocking innovative AI with Lean-Agile mindsets. A little bit more about myself. As you can see on this slide, this is my family. 23 years ago, my wife and I had a Renaissance theme wedding at her college. And then our son, over on the right, who's demonstrating a virtual reality interactive periodic table of the elements, is now a student at that college studying physics, mathematics, and material science. And then in the middle of the picture there is our kitties, Midnight Houdini and Snow White, because our last name is White. And they're in the yin-yang pose there. So that's just a little bit about me, but what we're going to cover today is, first we're going to talk about delayed versus regular feedback. And then we're going to apply that concept to artificial intelligence development and machine learning. And then we'll talk about why quality is key and how machine learning operations, MLOps, is a key to achieving that quality. We'll then jump into how you can capture your current state and then continue your journey through this thing called improvement kata. Now, before I jump into the delayed versus regular feedback topic, I wanted to share a coaching story that really pulls this concept together very nicely. I coached this financial data visualization team that delivered SAP dashboards for business decision makers. They delivered their dashboard increments every 2 weeks to their technical product owner following the Scrum framework. Unfortunately, they waited until the end of the quarter to get any end user feedback, and their end users were financial analysts. And when I learned that they waited until the end of the quarter to get this very necessary and valuable feedback, I asked them to describe from a high level the feedback they received from the end users, their financial analysts. And this is what I heard. The dashboard was not at all what the financial analysts were expecting. The dashboard was way too over-engineered to be useful for the financial analysts. And then one of the team members piped up and said, we spent 3 months developing the dashboard and they're not even using it. So they were really deflated at that point. The technical product owner shared with me how the dashboard really just didn't tell the right story for the financial analyst. And then he pulled me off to the side and told me that his boss and the business stakeholders are putting pressure on him to get those developers to deliver what our financial analysts need, not complicated, hard to use stuff. So I internalized this really important feedback to get an idea of where they're at on their journey. And then I walked them over to the whiteboard and I drew this graph. But before I actually explained the graph, I said to the team, I says, all of that feedback that you just provided for me is exactly what you're going to expect, or what you can expect when you are working in a delayed feedback environment. And they all kind of looked at me funny, like, oh, that's interesting. Well, so then I explained how this delayed feedback graph is an extrapolation from a book called The Lean Startup. And the author, Eric Ries, goes into quite a bit of detail explaining how all development efforts are, the larger they are, well, actually all development efforts are based on assumptions. And the larger the development effort is, the more assumptions are in that particular development effort. And the more assumptions that are unvalidated in a development effort, the more likely one of your assumptions is actually wrong. And in fact, if one of those assumptions are wrong, it can have impact all kinds of other assumptions. So then you have this real cascading mess on your hands. Well, before I could go finish, talking about that, I got interrupted by some team members, and they said, "Well, Don, yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. But how is this helping us? What can we do differently?" Well, that's when I actually erased that dotted line, and you can see that linear relationship going up. And you see the incremental delivery that they were delivering to their technical product owner, but they didn't get any feedback from the financial analyst till the end of the quarter. And you can see how that just went up linearly. But when I erased that line and I drew a new graph called the regular feedback graph. And I explained how this graph is another extrapolation from Eric's book, The Lean Startup. And I explained how Eric recommends that rather than, we'll look at your product backlog of all the stuff that you want to try to develop for whatever this development effort is. And look at where your most critical assumption is, that especially those assumptions that impact other assumptions that are in your backlog. And what you want to do is deliver that in your very first increment, and that is represented by that red line that's going on the graph. And when you deliver that to your external customers or your internal end users, have the team who developed it do a demonstration of that. But in addition to having the folks who are actually going to use the solution be there, have the business stakeholders there, and have the managers of the team members there as well. So they're involved in this journey. And the reason why you want that event to occur is because that is an opportunity for the teams to get direct feedback from those folks who are actually using the solutions. And by getting that feedback, the teams get a better understanding of why they need things in certain ways and why they need this whole big solution in the first place. And the more the development teams have that understanding, the more likely when they're developing things, they're going to uncover innovations that will delight and surprise those folks. Well, in addition to the teams learning, the teams then can ask those folks qualifying questions when they're getting that feedback. And the folks that are that are providing the feedback are also learning what types of information, what types of inputs that teams need in order to deliver them value. So the end users, the customers, the business stakeholders, they're learning as well. The managers, the team members that are at this particular event are also learning as learning how the organization is collaborating from that perspective, how the teams are collaborating with and learning from their end users and their customers and that type of thing. Well, you apply all that learning, the leaders of the team members are learning, the business stakeholders are learning, the end users and customers are learning, and the teams are learning as well. That's called organizational learning. And that organizational learning then can be applied to the next time they deliver. And the next time they delivered is represented by that orange line. And that is, and the reason why that orange line resets on that horizontal axis is because feedback was actually received, and then learning was applied to the next time an increment was delivered. Now let's go ahead and apply this. Let's say we break this into even smaller increments, and look what happens. The more organizational learning can be applied to incremental delivery, risk, rework, and waste will go down over time. But you know what else is more exciting about this aspect of incremental delivery is the fact that the end users and the external customers are getting value, and it keeps increasing over time compared to if you look back at delayed feedback. They get no value to the very end. They have nothing until the very end at the top of that line right there, of that sloping line. So, and let's see, Okay, now let's go ahead and apply this to machine learning and artificial intelligence development, okay? Cross-functional empowered teams that feel safe to experiment is an agile way to unlock innovation. Now, with artificial intelligence and machine learning teams, additional roles are needed, along with a new discipline, mathematics. And as you can see on this slide, these are new roles and they overlap across the disciplines. Now, by tapping into all of these perspectives, that's how the innovation emerges, the innovations emerge. However, doing so adds complexity, which elevates risks, providing even more reason for incremental. Well, actually, before I go into that, I actually wanted to spend 5 minutes with each of you, sending feedback on how your teams are constructed. For example, what I'm seeing two different types of structures. I'm seeing where traditional software development teams, that structure over on the left with the two overlapping disciplines, are adding the whole entire machine learning discipline to the team. That's one structure I'm seeing, and I can understand why that would be beneficial, because then you get all that domain expertise from that perspective. But I'm also seeing machine learning and artificial intelligence delivery teams that are structured exactly the way you see over here under the machine learning, where you got the 3 overlapping disciplines. So what I would like y'all to do is send a text, and let's see, I'm going to go down to the next slide here. What I'd like you to do is in the comments or the text app of this presentation platform, indicate whether your team is a cross-functional machine learning team, or whether it's a machine learning team that is been added to traditional software development. So you have all of that together. Or are you a machine learning team, but you're not cross-functional? And if you have a different structure, kind of indicate that. Now, in addition to providing that feedback in the comments, indicate whether your team swarms together around solutions, or whether you work in silos or you work in a different manner. And then I'll let Vishal, gather that information.
Audience, please respond. So we have one gentleman who says he's from IT services company into project management. He says they have cross-functional ML team.
Awesome.
Any others?
Well, when you provide that feedback, indicate whether the teams are collaborating and swarming around their development, or whether the team members on their team are working in silos, or if they're working in a different structure. Include that in that type of a feedback. That would be wonderful to hear that.
So another gentleman has said that there is a team in silo that works in silo, but anybody having any problem from any other department approaches them when they are not able to solve some problem.
Okay, awesome. And I'm asking this just out of curiosity because I have not had exposure to so many folks that are in this particular field, and I want to get a sense of how you all are working currently to get a current state right now. That's why I'm asking this particular question. And I think it also kind of helps the other folks hear this as well.
So yet another gentleman has said that they have cross-functional teams and some few people working in various teams, like as and when required. So they the central team of ML is deployed across various projects.
Okay.
No other comments coming. You can proceed probably.
Okay, awesome. All right. Well, one of the things I wanted to point out about this is when you have these additional disciplines and additional roles, it adds that complexity. And when you add complexity, that absolutely adds more risk. It elevates the risk, providing even more reason for incremental artificial intelligence delivery. And with incremental artificial intelligence and machine learning delivery, that minimizes the risk of building the wrong model, optimizing the wrong metrics, overshooting the required achievement in any of those metrics. But in order to deliver incrementally, quality is absolutely key. It can quickly become exponentially harder to execute on the requirements as your machine learning solutions progress and evolve if your standards, processes, and internal quality are not a core part of the effort. Machine learning solutions built with low standards will also be solutions where it is very hard to resume work after pausing for that really valuable real-world feedback. Now, this is where machine learning operations comes in and adds a ton of value. Machine learning operations, MLOps, asks that really important question. What does it take to deliver high-quality increments once per day per developer? Now, you want to talk about incremental delivery. That is pretty rapid delivery. And machine learning operations is an engineering culture. Keep that in mind. This is actually how Google defines it. They define it as an engineering culture, and why that is important is because that means it's more than just something that the developers do. It's something the whole organization is doing. That's where that organizational learning comes into play and that type of thing. But it is also about practices that aims at unifying your machine learning system development and your machine learning system operations. And when you are practicing MLOps, that means that you advocate for automation and monitoring at all steps of machine learning system construction, which includes integration, testing, releasing, deployment, and infrastructure management. So that's a pretty awesome culture and practice way to approach things. Now, what I would like to do now is walk you through the systems and lean thinking part of this journey, because when you are moving toward MLOps, it is a definite journey. It starts with gathering and visualizing data on how work flows through your value stream. You're gathering that current state understanding. And this is a way to do more of that organizational learning. Now, before I begin diving into this, I want to share another journey of a very courageous machine learning team that I had the privilege and honor to be their DevOps Dojo Sensei. And by the way, this team became champions in their company for DevOps coaching. Okay, they did not have ops roles on their team. They weren't very cross-functional. In fact, each team member worked separately on their own disparate solutions. And since they weren't working together, opportunities to learn from one another were very limited. And they waited until they had a completed machine learning solution, sometimes months, before getting any feedback from the end users that they were developing their solutions for. Now, during my first week with this team, they got pulled into a war room along with multiple machine learning teams in the area. And the reason for that is the machine learning platform went down. All machine learning solutions across multiple teams were dead for 3 days. And that gives you an idea of why MLOps is so important. Well, I shared the beginning of this journey so you would have an idea of where a MLOps journey can start. You may be further along in your journey, and that is just awesome. So, okay, now we can walk through a very valuable exercise that provided this team with valuable current state data to start their journey. Now, some of you may have already done a value stream mapping exercise before. Now, that's okay. I do a very simplified version of this, and we'll fast forward through the mechanics. Bear with me. I feel this quick walkthrough is a good application of system and lean thinking. Now, a really important part or an outcome that you're trying to achieve when you're doing a value stream mapping exercise is you're trying to gain a collective understanding of the current state. And that current, can you all, excuse me?
Don, have you changed your slide from MLOps?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you for, let me go back. I apologize. So you really didn't miss a lot. The experience would have been a little bit better, but I just had these messages pop up. I'm on this slide right now. Thank you for letting me know about that. I apologize that it wasn't going, that the slide was moving forward.
Okay.
So, getting that collective understanding, everybody who participates in the value stream should be involved. And so when I am with these teams, I ask them to invite anybody who they work with when they're developing their solutions to this value stream mapping exercise. But when they're inviting these external folks to this exercise, prepare them to commit a whole day to this exercise, because they're going to be providing input. They're going to be actively engaged in this, and they're going to get a ton of value out of this whole experience. All right. Now, before I actually kind of, walk through this particular activity, I wanted to kind of give you a sense of how you do it. Now, this can actually be done very easily virtually, but I'm going to kind of walk through how we did this in person. So we get all the people in a room, and we go to a whiteboard or an open wall in the room where we can add sticky notes. But then that's when I explain the whole purpose. We're here because we want to get a collective understanding of everything it takes to deliver value through our value stream. And we're going to identify all the steps in your value stream, and you all are going to have to come to a consensus on what those steps are. You may have to debate over it, but at some point you're going to come to consensus on what these steps are. But after we get all those steps, we're going to gather data on every one of those steps. And there's some more things that we're going to do, but I just wanted to give you an understanding of that. So then what I do with those folks that are there at the activity, I ask, what is the very first step in your value stream? And this machine learning value stream, the people at this session all came to the consensus that their very first step was defining their key performance indicators. Well, so then I asked, what's your next step? And they debated a while, but they actually concluded that our next step is to collect data. Well, bottom line is I asked what all the steps are, and these were the steps that they identified in their value stream. As you can see, they go from left to the right on the top and continue left to the right on the bottom. And this information in and of itself is very valuable. Getting everybody on the same page in terms of all the different things that you have to do to deliver your machine learning solutions. That's valuable just by itself, but we're going to add even more value. So then that's when I go and look at the very first step, and I ask, how much total time do you spend when, from a development perspective, when you're defining your key performance indicators? Well, they came to a consensus that they spend. Okay. All right. Now that thing doesn't want to move. Okay. Okay. Are y'all seeing my screen? My slides kind of got out of. Okay, they said 3 days, and so then they all came to a consensus on that. There was a little bit of a debate, and that's why this takes some time. And then the next question I asked is, how much total time does it take? And they said it actually takes 21 days. And then I asked, well, once you get your key performance indicators defined, what is your level of confidence that you actually got them defined correctly? And there was a considerable debate, and they came to the conclusion that their level of confidence was 50%. So I asked those same questions for all the steps in their value stream, and this is what their value stream looked like after. And it takes some time for them to come to agreement on all this information. And this right here alone is also very valuable because there's getting that collective understanding, that organizational learning, that's really valuable. But that's not the end of the value. The real important, the next most important thing is to look at where your bottlenecks are and where you have some potential quality issues. And a bottleneck is a step in your value stream that's taking way longer than any other step and is holding up work going through your value stream. That would be a bottleneck. Quality issues are where a step has a very low level of confidence. And so I challenged the folks there at the session to spend 15 minutes and come to a consensus on what is the number one bottleneck and what is the number one quality issue that they see in their value stream. And I said, in addition to just looking at your value stream map, I also want you to factor in your real world development experiences and that type of thing, and have that in your discussion. So I left the room for 15 minutes and gave them some time to identify that. And you can take a look at the value stream and see if you can identify where that is. Apologize. Why did that? Okay, bear with me. Okay. Is my slide back on the screen? I had a notification that interrupted the webinar, and I apologize for that. So this is what they came up with. This is what the folks at the value stream mapping exercise came up with. It's the very first step in their value stream is their big bottleneck. As you can see, 21 days, that takes the longest time, and that's holding up work going through their value stream. And that's when I asked the question, because I wanted to understand why it took so long. And they explained to me that their machine learning solutions cross multiple entities, and they have to work with all of those entities to figure out what the key performance indicators are. And it requires scheduling all kinds of different things, and that's why it takes 21 days. But I was curious as to why they had the 60% on select a model as their quality issue over you see the 50% for defining their key performance indicators. And because I would have thought that they would have thought the 50% level of confidence on key performance indicators would have been more important. But that's when I learned that they oftentimes, when they're working on their machine learning solutions, discover almost sometimes even in the middle of what they're developing, that the model that they're developing their solution around is not the right one, and then they have to start all over from scratch, and then that actually makes them have to redefine key performance indicators sometimes. So, but here's the thing: is the folks there, they were conflicted on what to do next. So they asked me. So we identified our bottlenecks and we identified our quality issues. So what do we do next, Don? And I said, well, now these are areas where you can experiment to improve these things, right? And so that is when I actually walked this team through the delayed versus regular feedback presentations I just recently walked you all through. And I could see while I was walking them through that their lights were clicking on, that they and in fact someone who said, hey, we need to do that. And but then there were some people that were there that were really adamant about, hey, this quality issue of selecting a model, I think we should really focus on that. And that's when I said, you guys can actually do them both at the same time. And then they looked at me really funny. Well, how are we going to do that? Well, that's actually when I presented them with this idea of set-based design. And with set-based design, it's a practice that keeps your requirements and design options flexible for as long as possible. And when I say design options, that could be your model options while you're developing your solutions. Instead of choosing a single point solution up front or a single model up front, set-based design identifies and simultaneously explores multiple options and eliminating poorer choices over time. And then one of the developers said, hey, that sounds a lot like parallel development. And I said, you're absolutely right. But here's what you guys could do. If you do that incremental delivery, first what you all need to kind of come to a consensus on is how do you want, what's the length of your time frame? Do you want to do 2 weeks, 1 week. The shorter the time frame, the more you can apply that organizational learning. Well, they debated a while, and they says, well, we feel that we can do a week. We can deliver our solutions in a week, or deliver increments, not our solutions, but deliver increments in a week. And so I says, well, because you're doing that incremental design, that makes set-based design even easier, because now what you can do is you can have pairs of people from your team working in model A, another pair working on model B, and another pair working on model C, and then in those incremental experiments, at the end of those sprints, you can get that organizational learning, and you can learn from it, and you can actually kind of see how the models, which ones are performing better. And you can do that multiple increments, and that can help you select your model. And so actually they really love that whole idea. But then that's when I says, well, it sounds like you guys have some experiments identified that you want to work on to improve your value stream. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and we're going to capture your experiments on this improvement kata board. So we went over onto the whiteboard, and I asked, okay, based on what I just heard you all talking about, what is the first experiment that you would like to conduct in your first sprint, if you will? And they said, well, we want to deliver to our end users in smaller batches. In other words, they want to do those 1 week sprints. And it says, now that is an awesome experiment, but you know what? I would like to know what you're hoping to achieve from that. And what is your desired outcome? And they said, well, we hope that it will be easier for us to determine what our key performance indicators are. And so then I said, okay, so we'll capture the results later. Now I thought I heard another experiment. Tell me what your next experiment you want to conduct to improve your value stream. And they all said, well, we want to apply that set-based design and that parallel development in our sprints. And I says, okay, well, so then what is the desired outcome you're hoping to achieve from doing that? And they said, well, we hope that we can make better model choices. And so the teams marched forward, and they captured their results after about a month. And it might have been longer, a little less. I can't remember the exact time frame. But this is what the results of their experiments were. So their key performance selection evolved, and they got better because they were able to apply that organizational learning as they were defining their key performance indicators. But then with that set-based design, they really loved the fact that they didn't have to completely redo work to switch models, because they already had a model in flight that they could quickly switch to and all coalesce on. But what they really liked about this whole experiment is how they learned a ton from each other and how they got more innovations through that type of an experience. And they did a bunch of other experiments, but I just wanted to give you an idea of how you can use your value stream map to get that current state, to identify bottlenecks. Actually, I think I have a summary here. So this is how you lean out waste. You get that collective understanding of your value stream map, and you bring as many folks into that activity as possible, so you can get that, again, that organizational learning. And then you go ahead and you identify those bottlenecks and your quality issues, and then you can go ahead and use that improvement kata to capture your experiments and track your experiments. And you do this on a cadence. You do this on a cadence, and you continuously revisit you revisit your value stream map after each of your sprints. You ask the question about those experiments. Did we get the outcomes that we were hoping to achieve? If we did, do we want to adopt this thing that we did, this experiment that we conducted? If you did not get the outcome that you were achieving, do we want to continue this experiment to capture more data? Maybe we just haven't done it long enough to know. But you basically, you're inspecting and then adapting based upon your learning and that type of a thing. Well, that is pretty much the end of this webinar. Now I'd like to be able to field some questions, comments, and I'm always looking for topics to do webinars on, so I would be interested to hear some of that type of feedback as well. And Vishal, you can go ahead and field those questions, and we can have a conversation.
Sure. Thanks for the presentation. Can you go back to the slide?
Go back one slide?
Yeah, on the whole dashboard that you were just showing, in the previous one. Go back. You had lead and cycle time. Yeah, so cycle time I understand. What is lead here? Because it's not
lead, okay. I didn't explain that. I apologize. I'm glad that you pointed that out. And the cycle time is the actual time spent in each actual time the development team spends on each of those steps, and that's all tallied up there. That's where that 20 days comes in. And then the lead time is the actual total time tallied up. That's where the 44 days comes in. So it was taking them 44 days for their lead time. Now they actually in 3 months they cut their lead time down 50% through the experiments that this team was conducting. So you can make a significant impact. Now, the other thing that's really cool about when you do those experiments and you revisit your value stream map is you go out and update your value stream map with the time frame that you take, and then you can make the card a different color, but you can indicate where you made the improvement, and that's kind of an awesome way to see where you're making some improvements, if that makes sense. Did that answer your question, Vishal?
So I got that. Another one is, if I understand correctly, from set-based design, you are talking about if three people are coming up with three different models, so they are parallelly working on the same KPIs but different models. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, it could be. I don't know enough about machine learning to answer that question. You might know that better than myself.
That's what
I could see where it could be. It could be all working based on the same key performance. Yeah, and in fact, since they're small incremental experiments, I would have to say yes, they would be working on the same key performance indicators because that's what they're evaluating their experiments on.
Right. Okay.
Because they're comparing those models as they're delivering incrementally into the production environment. And the other thing that is I didn't mention is, in addition to getting that organizational learning, the instrumenting whatever solutions that you have so you can get systematic feedback on whatever the things that you're developing. That is also part of the feedback that you would factor into comparing your models. Things like performance, system performance, and those types of things.
Okay. Another question is, what type of metrics was adopted by them to evaluate?
Say that again?
What type of metrics were adopted by them to evaluate?
It depends on the particular domain that you're working on. That's where your key performance indicators come in. That's how you evaluate everything that the teams are working on. And I mean, it depends on really the context. So, did that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah. So any other questions, audience? So I see people here from Italy, UAE, India, another from US, I believe. So any other questions from across the board? So I don't see any other questions coming. So this session is being recorded and will be made live on our YouTube channel in 2 to 3 days time. I'll just put in the link for the same.
Well, and here's something else, Vishal. If folks can think of topics that they would like me to put on another webinar for, I would like to hear any of those types of topics as well.
Sure, I'll get that feedback for you. So I'm just putting I've just put the Self-Start YouTube channel link for everybody's reference. Here we will be putting Don's uh, webinar video in 2 to 3 days time if you would like to relook at it. I'm sure your model that you just showed will be benefiting quite a lot of people, and I see that kind of usage will be beneficial to Indian companies quite a lot. So one question is, where does the role of product manager fit in the ML role culture here?
Product manager, product managers typically oversee product owners. They're a higher level than a product owner, but it kind of depends on what type of framework your organization is adopting. So it really kind of depends. I'd have to know more about that particular context from that perspective, but typically a product manager oversees multiple teams, and on each of those teams you have a product owner, if that makes sense.
Sure. So any other final questions? So I'm not getting any more questions, Don. If anything comes through, I'll send them to you for further answering. And
Awesome.
Look forward to some other sessions from you in near future.
Yeah, no, before I just forgot about this last slide, is if folks want to check out some of my videos out on my YouTube channel, just look for AgilityScience, and you can look for my logo, and that'll take you right into my YouTube channel. I'm going to continually to add to that channel, and of course, you want to link in with me on LinkedIn, I would love that as well. I have some articles I posted out on my LinkedIn profile that could be very useful for you as well. And again, thank you so much for attending this webinar, Organizational Learning, Unlocking Innovative Artificial Intelligence Development with Lean-Agile Mindsets.
Great. Thanks a lot, Don. And thank you all for attending. It's been a busy day. We had another webinar before this. So thank you all for joining, and have a good night ahead, and have a good day ahead, Don. See you all next time.
Awesome. Thank you.